Shout at me again and I'll end you. The whole diner heard it. 12 people froze. The coffee cup he'd hurled was still dripping down the wall 3 inches from her head, and instead of crying, instead of apologizing, waitress Emily Carter leaned across the counter and said 6 words to Vincent Moretti that no one in 20 years had dared to say. The man who owned half the city. The man feared by everyone without exception. And he stopped. Completely. Because for the first time in his life, someone wasn't afraid of him. Before we go further, if you love stories about courage, dignity, and the moment a quiet person finally refuses to back down, subscribe to this channel and stay with me all the way to the end. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels tonight. The cup hadn't even finished its journey when the diner went silent. Not the ordinary quiet of a slow night, but the kind of silence that feels like the whole world is holding its breath. 12 people sat frozen at their tables. A trucker near the window stopped chewing. An old couple in the corner booth reached for each other's hands without realizing they were doing it. And the cook, a man named Reuben, who had survived 2 tours overseas and never flinched at anything, set down his spatula and went very, very still. Emily Carter stood exactly where she had been standing, one hand still holding the half-empty coffee pot, the other resting on the edge of the counter. The brown liquid was running down the wall behind her, in a slow ribbon dripping onto the cracked tile floor. A few drops had landed on her sleeve. She didn't look at them. She looked at him. Vincent Moretti was a man other men crossed the street to avoid. 61 years old, silver at the temples, dressed in a coat that cost more than Emily made in 3 months. 2 of his men stood near the door, and a third leaned against the jukebox with his arms folded, watching the room the way a wolf watches a field full of sheep. Everyone in the city knew the name Moretti. They knew it the way they knew which alleys to avoid after dark. They knew it the way you know not to put your hand on a hot stove. You didn't have to be told twice. "I asked you a question," Vincent said, lowering his voice now, which was somehow worse than the shouting. "Do you know who I am?" Emily set the coffee pot down on the warmer. She did it slowly, deliberately, and the small click of glass against metal was the only sound in the room. "I know exactly who you are," she said. "Then you know what happens to people who waste my time." A younger waitress, Dana, was standing near the kitchen pass, and she made a small sound, almost a whimper, and took a step forward as if to apologize on Emily's behalf, as if to throw herself between them. Emily lifted one hand just slightly, and Dana stopped. This was the moment. Everyone in that diner understood it. This was the moment where Emily Carter was supposed to lower her eyes and say she was sorry, where she was supposed to make a new cup of coffee with shaking hands and pray the man would leave. That was how it always went. That was how it was supposed to go. But Emily Carter was 34 years old, and she had spent the last 2 years watching her mother's body fail in small, cruel increments. She had spent 11 months arguing with insurance companies that answered the phone with cheerful voices and then told her again and again that the treatment her mother needed was not covered. She had $9.50 an hour and a stack of bills in a kitchen drawer that she could no longer bring herself to open. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night, in longer than she could remember. And somewhere in the last few weeks, something inside her had quietly, completely run out. So she did not lower her eyes. She leaned forward, placed both hands flat on the counter, and looked Vincent Moretti directly in the face, and in a voice that was calm, almost gentle, almost kind, she said 6 words. "Shout at me again, and I'll end you." The man by the jukebox actually laughed, a short, disbelieving bark of a laugh. One of the men by the door took a step forward, his hand drifting toward the inside of his jacket. But Vincent Moretti did not move. He did not laugh. He did not nod to his men or wave them off. He simply stood there, completely still, staring at this waitress in a faded uniform who had just said something to him that no one had said in 20 years. Because here was the thing that nobody else in that room understood, but that Vincent understood instantly. She was not afraid. He had spent 4 decades learning to read fear in other people. He could smell it. He could see it in the way a man's throat moved when he swallowed, in the tiny tremor at the corner of a mouth, in the way eyes flicked toward exits. He had built an empire on the reliable, predictable presence of fear in every room he walked into. And it was not in this room, not in her. "What did you say?" Vincent said. It was not a question. It came out flat, almost wondering. "You heard me?" "Boss," the man by the door said quietly. "Want me to—" "No," Vincent said, and his eyes never left Emily's face. "Nobody touches anything." For a long moment, the two of them simply looked at each other across the counter. The coffee was still dripping down the wall. The old couple in the corner had not let go of each other's hands. Reuben the cook had not moved from his place by the grill. "You don't know who you're talking to," Vincent said finally. "I think I do," Emily said. "I think you're a man who is used to people being scared of him, and I think you've gone so long without anyone telling you no that you've started to believe the world actually belongs to you." She straightened up. "It doesn't. It just rents you a little space while you're loud enough to take it. Now, you broke a cup. That's $2. You want another coffee or you want your check?" Somebody at one of the tables made a sound that might have been a gasp or might have been a sob. Vincent Moretti looked at her for what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 seconds. Then slowly he reached into his coat. Dana flinched, but he pulled out a leather billfold, removed a $100 bill, and laid it flat on the counter, smoothing it once with 2 fingers. "For the cup," he said. Then he turned and walked out, his men scrambling to follow, and the bell above the door rang once, twice, and then he was gone into the night, and the convoy of black SUVs pulled away from the curb, and the diner exhaled all at once, like a single living thing. Dana was the first to reach her. Em, oh my God, are you out of your mind? Do you know who that was? Do you know what he could—" "I know who it was," Emily said. She picked up a rag and turned to the wall and began wiping away the coffee, her hands perfectly steady. And only she knew that her heart was slamming so hard against her ribs that she thought she might be sick. Reuben came out from behind the grill, wiping his hands on his apron, and stood looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Emily," he said quietly, "that man owns half this city. He owns judges. He owns cops. People who talk to him the way you just did don't always come back to work the next day." "Then I guess I'll have an interesting week," Emily said. But her voice cracked just slightly on the last word, and Reuben heard it, and he put a hand on her shoulder, and for a second she let herself lean into it before she pulled away and went back to wiping the wall. That was the thing nobody saw. Everybody saw the woman who stared down Vincent Moretti. Nobody saw the woman who 40 minutes later sat in the cab of her 15-year-old car in the empty parking lot with her forehead pressed against the steering wheel, shaking so hard she couldn't get the key into the ignition. Nobody saw her whisper over and over, "What did I just do? What did I just do?" Because Emily Carter was not brave, not the way people would tell the story later. She was tired. There is a difference between courage and the moment you simply have nothing left to lose, and she knew exactly which one she'd been running on. She had a mother in a rented hospital bed in the living room of a 1-bedroom apartment. She had a brother who hadn't called in 3 years. She had a savings account with $211 in it. If Vincent Moretti decided to make her life difficult, there was no version of her life that could absorb the blow. She finally got the car started and drove home. Her mother was awake when she came in, propped up against the pillows, the small lamp on the side table casting a warm glow over the thin face that Emily loved more than anything in the world. "You're late, baby," her mother said. Her name was Ruth, and her voice was a paper-thin version of the strong, laughing voice Emily remembered from childhood. "Long night, you could say that." Emily sat on the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand, careful of the IV line. "How are you feeling?" "Like a woman who is going to outlive every doctor who's ever underestimated her." Ruth smiled. "Did you eat?" "I'll eat in a minute. Did Mrs. Alvarez come by?" "She brought soup. She's a good woman. You sleep, I'll be fine." Ruth squeezed her daughter's hand with what little strength she had. "You work too hard, Emily. You've always worked too hard. Even when you were little, you'd rather break than bend that one, your father used to say." Emily looked down at their joined hands. "Mama," she said, "I might have done something stupid tonight." "You?" Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Never." "There was a man at the diner. A bad man. He yelled at me." Emily hesitated. "And I yelled back. Worse than back." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she reached up with a trembling hand and touched her daughter's cheek. "Good," she said softly. "I raised you to stand up straight. Whatever happens, you remember that you stood up straight." And Emily, who had not cried in front of her mother in 2 years, because she could not let herself felt the tears come anyway, hot and silent, and she pressed her mother's hand to her face and let them fall. She did not sleep that night. She lay on the couch a few feet from her mother's bed, listening to the soft, mechanical rhythm of the oxygen machine, and she waited. She waited for headlights in the parking lot. She waited for a knock at the door. She waited for the sound of men who had no faces coming to make an example of the waitress who didn't know her place. Nothing came. The morning came instead, gray and ordinary, and she got up and made coffee and helped her mother to the bathroom and gave her the 11 o'clock medications and went to work the lunch shift with dark circles under her eyes and her chin held a little higher than it needed to be, daring the world to say something. The diner was busy. The story had already gotten around. People looked at her differently. A regular named Pete, a retired mechanic who came in every day for the meatloaf, caught her arm as she refilled his coffee and said low, "I heard what you did. That took guts, kid. But you watch yourself. That man doesn't forget." "I'm not worried about him forgetting," Emily said. "I'm worried about the rent." Pete laughed, but it was a worried laugh. The lunch rush came and went. The afternoon stretched out long and slow. And at 4 o'clock, when the light through the windows had gone gold and the diner was nearly empty, the bell above the door rang and Emily looked up and Vincent Moretti walked in. He was alone this time. No convoy, no men, no coat that cost a fortune. Just a dark sweater and slacks and a man who somehow looked smaller without an audience to be feared by. He stood in the doorway for a moment and the few people in the diner went quiet and Dana behind the register went white. Vincent walked to the counter. He did not sit at a table. He sat on a stool directly across from where Emily was standing, folded his hands on the counter and looked at her. "I'd like a coffee," he said. "Made however you want to make it. I won't complain." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned, took a clean cup and filled it, and set it down in front of him without a word. He wrapped both hands around it. He didn't drink. He just held it looking down into the dark surface. "I didn't sleep last night," he said. "Funny," Emily said. "Neither did I. I kept waiting for your friends to come visit." "They're not coming." He looked up. "I came to tell you that myself. Nobody is coming. Not last night, not tonight, not next week." He turned the cup slowly on the counter. "You can stop waiting." Emily said nothing. She didn't trust it. You didn't survive in her world by trusting men like him. "You want to know why I came back?" Vincent asked. "Not really." A flicker of something crossed his face, almost a smile. 20 years, he said. "Maybe more. 20 years since anyone in this city looked at me the way you did last night. You know how people look at me. They look at my hands. They look at the door. They look anywhere but my eyes because they're afraid that if they meet my eyes, I'll see something I don't like." He lifted the coffee, drank, set it down. "You looked right at me. You told me you'd end me. A woman who makes $9 an hour and couldn't end a houseplant if you gave her a week." He shook his head slowly. "And I believed you. That's the part I can't figure out. For 1 second standing in this miserable little diner, I believed you." "Maybe you should," Emily said. He laughed then, a real laugh, short and rough like a muscle he hadn't used in a long time. "Maybe I should." He looked around the diner at the cracked vinyl booths and the faded photographs on the wall and the menu board with the prices in plastic letters that didn't quite line up. "What's your name?" "You don't get my name." "Why not?" "Because names are for people who've earned them. You broke a cup and threw $100 at me like I was a problem you could pay to go away. That's not a man I give my name to." Vincent nodded slowly, as if she had said something profound, as if he was filing it away somewhere. He finished his coffee. He stood up. He took out his billfold, and Emily's jaw tightened, and he saw it, and he stopped. He put the billfold away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled singles and some change, counted out the exact price of a coffee, and laid it neatly on the counter. "For the coffee," he said. "Just the coffee." And then he walked out and the bell rang and he was gone. Dana came rushing over the second the door closed. What did he say? What did he want, Emily? What is happening? I have no idea, Emily said quietly, watching through the window as the man crossed the parking lot and got into a single ordinary black car and drove away alone. I genuinely have no idea, but she had a feeling. A strange, cold, certain feeling deep in her chest, because she had seen something in Vincent Moretti's eyes in that last moment before he left. She had spent 2 years sitting beside a hospital bed watching her mother, learning to read the things people don't say out loud. And she knew the look of a person who was starving for something. She'd seen it in the mirror. She just didn't know yet what it was that Vincent Moretti was so hungry for. She didn't know that it was not power because he had all the power in the world. She didn't know that it was not money because money meant nothing to him anymore. She didn't know that the most dangerous man in the city had walked into a roadside diner looking for the one thing his entire empire had never been able to buy him. She wiped down the counter where he'd been sitting. She put the crumpled dollars in the register, and she went back to work telling herself it was over, that he'd gotten whatever strange thing he'd needed, and now he would disappear back into his world of black cars and frightened men, and she would never see him again. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about almost everything that was coming, because the man who had walked out that door was going to come back, and he was going to keep coming back, and the two of them, the waitress with nothing and the king of a city built on fear, were about to learn that the walls each of them had spent a lifetime building were not nearly as strong as they had always believed. And it had all started with 6 words and a broken cup on the night that everything for both of them quietly and completely broke. He came back on Thursday. Emily knew it was him before the bell finished ringing. There was a particular quality to the silence that fell over the diner when Vincent Moretti walked in, a kind of held breath, a pause in the ordinary hum of human noise. The trucker at the counter set down his fork. Dana's hand froze halfway to the coffee pot. And Emily, who had told herself for 3 days that she would never see this man again, turned around and felt something tighten in her chest that she refused to name. He sat at the same stool, the one directly across from her station, as if it had become his. "Coffee," he said, "however you make it. That seat have your name on it now?" "Apparently." He almost smiled. "It's the only place in this city where nobody's pretending." Emily poured the coffee and set it down. She didn't ask what he meant. She'd learned in her line of work that the people who needed to talk would talk eventually if you just let the silence sit long enough. And Vincent Moretti, for all his money and all his fear, was a man who needed to talk. She could see it in the way he held the cup, like it was the only warm thing he'd touched in years. "You still won't give me your name," he said. "Nope." "Why does that bother me so much?" "Because you're a man who gets everything he wants," Emily said, wiping down the counter beside him. "And I'm the first thing in a long time that you can't have." He laughed, that rough, unused laugh. "You're not afraid of me at all, are you? Even now, even knowing what I am." "I'm afraid of plenty of things," Emily said. "Your bills, my rent, the phone ringing at 3 in the morning, the look on a doctor's face when he comes out of a room." She set down the rag. "You're not on the list. You don't make the list." Something shifted in his face. He looked at her differently, then the way a man looks at a door he didn't know was there. "What's at 3 in the morning?" he asked. And there it was, the first real question. Not a threat dressed up as conversation, not a man circling to see if she'd break. An actual question about her actual life. Emily looked at him for a long moment, weighing it, and then decided that a man who came to a diner because it was the only place nobody pretended deserved one true thing. "My mother," she said. "She's sick, the kind of sick that doesn't get better. I take care of her. So when the phone rings at 3 in the morning, my whole body goes cold because someday it's going to be the call." She picked the rag back up. "That's 3 in the morning. You asked." Vincent didn't say he was sorry. She was grateful for that. Everybody said they were sorry, and it never meant anything. It was just a noise people made to close a door. Instead, he said, "How long?" 2 years. The doctors gave her 6 months 2 years ago, so..." Emily shrugged. "She's stubborn. I come by it honest." "What's wrong with her? Her heart? Her kidneys?" "Take your pick, they're all giving up at once. There's a treatment, there's always a treatment. It's just not the kind of treatment a waitress can afford, and the insurance company has a man whose entire job is finding reasons to say no." She said it lightly, but her hands had gone still on the counter. I sold my father's truck last month. That bought us 6 weeks of medication. I'm running out of things to sell." The diner was quiet around them. Dana had drifted to the far end pretending to refill napkin dispensers, but Emily could see her listening. The trucker had gone back to his food. The afternoon light was thin and gold and ordinary, and a powerful man sat at a counter listening to a waitress talk about the slow loss of her mother. And for once in his life he had nothing to say, no leverage, no angle, nothing to do but listen. "I could fix that," Vincent said finally. "The treatment, the money, one phone call. It would be done by tomorrow." And there it was. Emily had been waiting for it. She set the rag down very deliberately and looked at him. "No," she said. "You didn't even—" "I don't need to hear the rest. The answer is no. It's a phone call. It's nothing to me. Your mother gets her treatment. You stop selling your father's things. You sleep through the night. Why would you say no to that? Because nothing is free with men like you." Emily leaned forward, both hands on the counter, the same way she had on that first night. "You fix my mother, and then one day, maybe next month, maybe next year, you come back and you need something. A favor, a blind eye, a package held behind the counter, and I can't say no because you own my mother's life now. That's how it works with you people. You don't give gifts, you give leashes." She straightened up. "I'd rather lose her free than keep her on your chain." The words hung in the air. Dana had stopped pretending to fill the napkins. Even the trucker had looked up. Vincent Moretti stared at her, and then slowly he nodded, not in anger, in something closer to wonder. "You really would, wouldn't you?" he said quietly. "You'd let her die before you'd take my help." "I'd let her die free," Emily said. "There's a difference. You wouldn't understand it, but there's a difference." He sat with that for a long moment. Then he drank his coffee, set down the exact change, and left without another word. And Emily stood there with her heart pounding because she had meant every word, and because some small, starving part of her had wanted just for a second to say yes. That night at the kitchen table, she sat with the drawer full of bills finally open in front of her. The numbers swam. The treatment that would keep her mother alive cost $11,000 for the first round. She had $211 and a car that was worth maybe $800 if she was lucky. She put her head down on the table among the envelopes, and she stayed there a long time. In the other room, the oxygen machine hummed its steady rhythm. Ruth was sleeping. Emily had learned to find comfort in that sound, the proof that her mother was still breathing, still here, still hers. She lifted her head and wiped her face and put the bills back in the drawer and closed it. She had said no to $11,000 today. She told herself she was right. She told herself it over and over until she almost believed it. He came back on Saturday. This time he didn't sit at the counter. He took a booth in the corner, the one by the window, and he ordered actual food, a plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the kind of plain American cooking that a man worth $100 million had no business eating. Emily brought it over, and he gestured at the seat across from him. "Sit," he said. 5 minutes. I'm a paying customer. I get 5 minutes. "I'm working." "Dana's got the floor. I watched. There's 3 tables and she's bored." He nodded at the seat again. 5 minutes. Emily glanced at Dana, who waved her on with an expression of barely contained panic, and she sat because she was tired, and because some part of her was curious, and because the man had ordered meatloaf, and that small, ordinary fact had disarmed her more than any threat could have. "I have a daughter," Vincent said. No preamble. He cut into the meatloaf and didn't look at her. "Her name's Sophia. She's 31. She hasn't spoken to me in 4 years." Emily didn't say anything. She'd learned that too. She found out what I do, what I really do, not the version with the import business and the restaurants. She found out and she packed a bag, and she told me she'd rather have no father than have me. He chewed slowly. "She has a little boy now, my grandson. I've never met him. I found out he existed from a Christmas card she sent to my lawyer, not to me, to my lawyer, so he'd know I wasn't going to find them." "Good for her," Emily said. He looked up sharply. "You wanted me to say something soft," Emily said. "I'm not going to. You want to know what I think? I think your daughter's smart. I think she looked at her little boy and decided he wasn't going to grow up learning that this is how a man gets to be in the world. I think she's braver than you've ever been, because walking away from everything you own took more guts than building it." She held his gaze. You came in here wanting me to feel sorry for you. I don't. I feel sorry for her raising a kid alone so he doesn't turn out like his grandfather." The fork stopped halfway to his mouth. For a moment, Emily thought she'd gone too far, that she'd finally found the line that the man across from her would remember what he was and what she was, and the temperature in the room would change. Instead, he set the fork down and he laughed, and there was something broken in it. "You know what's funny?" he said. "That's the first true thing anyone said to me in 4 years. Everybody around me, they tell me what I want to hear. They've been telling me what I want to hear for so long I forgot what the truth sounds like." He shook his head. "You just told me my daughter's better off without me, and I want to shake your hand for it. What is wrong with me?" "You're lonely," Emily said simply. "That's all this is. You're the most powerful man in the city, and you're so lonely you're driving across town to eat meatloaf in a diner because a waitress yelled at you and didn't apologize. You don't want to own me. You don't even want to help me. Not really. You just want one person on this earth to talk to you like you're a man instead of a name." She stood up. "There's your 5 minutes. Eat your food." She walked away, and she felt his eyes on her back the whole way, and she knew she'd hit something true because the truth makes a particular kind of silence, and the booth behind her was full of it. 20 minutes later when he left, he didn't leave money on the table. He left $200 folded under the salt shaker, and when Emily found it, she chased him out into the parking lot. "Take it back," she said, holding it out. "It's a tip. It's a leash. We talked about this." She pushed it at him. "I bring you a meatloaf, you tip me a 5, maybe a 10 if you're feeling generous. You don't tip $200 unless you're trying to make somebody owe you something." "I'm not trying to make you owe me anything," Vincent said, and for the first time he sounded almost frustrated, almost human. "I'm trying to do one decent thing." "One. Do you have any idea how long it's been since I did something just because it was decent? Take the money. Don't take the money. I don't care. I just wanted to do it." He got in his car. "Maybe you can let a man do one good thing without deciding it's a trap. Maybe everything isn't a trap." He drove away, and Emily stood in the parking lot holding $200 she didn't want. And the worst part was that he might have been telling the truth. She kept the money. She told herself she was keeping it for her mother. She put it in the drawer with the bills, and it sat there like a stone. The weeks went strange after that. He came in 2-3 times a week, always the corner booth now, always meatloaf or the pot roast or whatever the special was, eating it like it was the best food he'd ever had, which for a man who could afford any restaurant in the world made no sense at all. And every time Emily would sit for 5 minutes, sometimes 10, and they would talk. Not like friends. They weren't friends. They were two people from opposite ends of the earth who had somehow found in each other the only person who would tell them the truth. She learned things. She learned that he'd grown up poor, poorer than her, that his father had been a drunk, and his mother had cleaned houses and died at 46 from working herself to death. She learned that he'd built everything he had out of a terror of ever being powerless again, and that somewhere along the way, the thing he'd built to protect himself had become the thing that ate his life. She learned that he had another child too, a son who worked for him, who was being groomed to take over the empire, and that Vincent looked at his son and saw a younger version of the man he'd become and hated it. "Marco wants it," Vincent said one afternoon. "My son. He wants the whole thing. The power, the fear, all of it. He's hungry for it the way I was. And I look at him, and I think I made that. I made a man who can't wait to inherit a kingdom of frightened people." He turned his cup slowly. Sophia ran from it. Marco's racing toward it. And I don't know how to tell either one of them. They've both got it wrong. "Then tell Marco," Emily said. "You're his father. Tell him." "It's too late for Marco. He's already most of the way gone." Vincent's jaw tightened. "But there's a grandson, Sophia's boy. He's 3. He's not gone. Nobody's ruined him yet." He looked at her. "That's the one that keeps me up at night. Not the businesses, not the federal investigation. A 3-year-old boy I've never met who's the only clean thing left with my blood in him." "Federal investigation," Emily repeated. Vincent waved a hand. "There's always a federal investigation. They've been trying to put me away for 15 years. But something flickered behind his eyes, and Emily, who had gotten good at reading him, saw that this time was different. This time something had changed. She didn't push, but she filed it away. What she didn't tell him, what she didn't tell anyone, was that her mother was getting worse. The Saturday after the meatloaf conversation, Ruth had a bad night, the worst in months, and Emily spent it on her knees beside the hospital bed, holding her mother's hand, listening to her struggle for each breath, certain that this was it, that the 3 a.m. call had come, and she was inside it. Ruth pulled through by morning. But the doctor, when Emily finally got him on the phone, was gentle, in the way that doctors are gentle when they're telling you to prepare yourself. Without the treatment, he said, "We're talking weeks, maybe a couple months. I'm sorry, Emily. I wish I had better news." Weeks, maybe a couple months. And $11,000 sitting on the other side of a phone call she'd refused to let a dangerous man make. She didn't go to work that day. She sat at the kitchen table and she looked at the drawer full of bills and the $200 from Vincent, and she did the math she'd done 100 times, and it came out the same way it always did. There was no version of the numbers where she won. She thought about calling him. She got as far as picking up her phone. She didn't have his number. Of course she didn't have his number. She'd refused to give him her name, and she sat there holding a useless phone, the proud waitress who wouldn't take help from a criminal, and she understood for the first time that her pride might cost her mother her life, and she didn't know if she could carry that. She put the phone down. She went to work the next day. She didn't tell him, but he knew something was wrong. The moment she brought his coffee, he set it down without drinking and said, "What happened?" "Nothing." "You've got the same face I had the morning my mother died. Don't tell me nothing." He pushed out the seat across from him. "Sit down." She sat. She didn't mean to talk, but she was so tired, and he was looking at her with those eyes that, for all their history, were the only eyes in her life that ever asked her how she was doing, and it came out before she could stop it. She had a bad night. The doctor says weeks, without the treatment. Emily's voice was flat, scraped clean of everything. "Weeks." Vincent went very still. "And you still won't let me make the call." "I don't know what I'll let you do anymore," Emily said, and her voice cracked, and she hated it, hated breaking in front of him. "I keep telling myself I'm doing the right thing, that I'm protecting her, that a free death is better than a life that belongs to you." She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. "And then I sit by her bed and listen to her trying to breathe, and I think, who am I protecting her, or just my own pride? Am I going to let my mother die so I can feel clean?" She dropped her hands. I don't know anymore." The diner was empty around them. It was the dead hour, the lull between lunch and dinner, and there was no one but Dana in the back and the two of them in the corner booth. "Listen to me," Vincent said, and his voice was different than she'd ever heard it. There was no power in it, no weight, no threat, just a man. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to actually hear it, not the version of me you've decided I am, the version that gives leashes. Just hear me." He leaned forward. "I'll pay for the treatment, all of it, every round for as long as she needs it, and I will never, not once, not ever ask you for a single thing in return, not a favor, not a package behind the counter, not a blind eye, nothing. You'll never owe me anything. You have my word." "Your word," Emily said. "I know what my word is worth to most people," Vincent said. "I know what I am. But you, of all the people on this earth, you're the only one I've never lied to, because you're the only one who'd see through it. So believe me when I tell you this is the truth. Let me do one good thing. Let me save your mother and ask nothing for it. Let that be the one clean thing I did in a life full of dirty ones." His jaw was tight. "Don't let her die so you can be proud of yourself. She raised you better than that. You told me yourself she raised you to stand up straight. Standing up straight doesn't mean refusing every hand. Sometimes it means knowing the difference between a hand and a chain." Emily stared at him. Tears were running down her face now, and she didn't bother to wipe them. "Why?" she whispered. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because you're the only person in 20 years who looked at me and didn't see a monster," Vincent said. "You saw a man, and monsters can't be saved, but men can. You gave me that. You gave me the chance to find out I'm still a man." His own voice was rough now. "Let me give you your mother. It's not a leash, Emily. It's a thank you." And she noticed even through the tears that he had used her name. He'd learned it somehow. Dana probably. He'd known it for weeks and never said it, waiting, holding it until the moment it would mean something. She put her face in her hands and she cried, really cried, the kind of crying she hadn't allowed herself in 2 years. And Vincent Moretti sat across from her in the corner booth and didn't touch her, didn't say, there, didn't do anything but wait, the way she'd once waited for him to find his words. "Okay," she finally said, muffled, broken. "Okay, for her, not for me, for her." "For her," Vincent agreed quietly. He made the call right there in front of her so she could hear every word. He didn't whisper. He didn't step away. He called a number and said a name and said pay for everything. The best people, the best facilities start tomorrow. And when the voice on the other end started to ask a question, he said no questions, just do it, and hung up. "Tomorrow," he said to Emily. "Someone will come to the diner tomorrow with the paperwork. Your mother starts treatment this week, real treatment, the kind that works." He stood up and he put money on the table, the exact amount for the coffee and not a penny more, because he'd finally learned, and he looked down at her. "Thank you, Emily, for letting me." He walked out. The bell rang, and Emily sat alone in the corner booth and cried until she had nothing left, and for the first time in 2 years, they were not entirely tears of grief. But even then, even in that moment of unbearable relief, something cold turned over in the back of her mind. The thing he'd said weeks ago waved away with the back of his hand. The federal investigation, the flicker behind his eyes. A man like Vincent Moretti didn't get to step out of his life just because he wanted to. Empires built on fear did not let their kings retire. And a man who started doing good things, who started caring, who started letting one waitress see him as human, was a man who had stopped being useful to the people who depended on his cruelty. She didn't know yet what was coming. She didn't know about the meeting Marco had already taken, or the deal already being whispered in rooms she would never see, or the way the word had already started to spread, that the old man had gone soft, had gone strange, had started spending his afternoons in some roadside diner like he'd lost his mind. She didn't know that the very kindness she had pulled out of him, the humanity she had given him back, was the thing that was about to put him in the crosshairs of his own kingdom. She only knew that her mother was going to live. She held on to that. She drove home that night and she sat on the edge of the hospital bed and she took her mother's hand and she said, "Mama, we got the money. You're going to get the treatment. You're going to be okay." And Ruth, who was so much weaker than she'd been even a month ago, opened her eyes and smiled and said, "I told you, baby. I'm going to outlive every doctor who ever doubted me." She squeezed her daughter's hand. "Where'd the money come from?" Emily hesitated. And then she told the truth, because she had built her whole life on telling the truth, even when it cost her. "A man," she said. "A bad man. Trying to be good. I think maybe I helped him be good. I don't know." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There's no such thing as a bad man trying to be good, Emily. There's just a man, and what he does next." Her eyes drifted closed. "You watch what he does next." And miles away in a house behind tall gates, Vincent Moretti sat alone in the dark with a phone in his hand and his son's number on the screen, and he did not call because he already knew, in the way that men in his world always knew, that the ground had begun to shift beneath him and that the price of becoming a man again was going to be everything he had. The man with the paperwork came the next morning, just like Vincent said. He was younger than Emily expected, in a gray suit that fit him too well, carrying a leather folder and an expression of professional blankness. He asked for her by name. He didn't introduce himself. He laid the documents on the counter and walked her through them in a low, efficient voice, and Emily understood maybe half of it, but she understood the important part. Her mother's treatment was paid for. The best cardiac specialist in the state had been retained. A medical transport would come Thursday to move Ruth to a real facility with real equipment, real doctors, real hope. "Sign here," the man said, "and here, and initial here." Emily's hand shook as she signed. When she finished, the man closed the folder and looked at her for a moment, and something almost like curiosity crossed his blank face. "You should know," he said quietly, "that I've worked for Mr. Moretti for 9 years, and I have never once seen him do anything like this. Pay for a stranger's mother, no strings, no file opened on you, nothing. He picked up the folder. "Whatever you did to him, miss, you should be careful. Men around him have noticed he's changed. And in our world, when a man like that changes, it makes people nervous. Nervous people do things." He nodded once. "Take care of yourself." And he walked out, and Emily stood at the counter with the cold feeling spreading through her chest again, because the lawyer had just confirmed the thing she'd been afraid of since the night Vincent first sat at her counter and held a cup of coffee like it was the only warm thing in the world. Her mother got better. It happened faster than Emily dared to hope. Within 2 weeks of starting the real treatment, Ruth could sit up without fighting for air. Within 3, she was complaining about the hospital food, which Emily had learned was the surest sign of her mother's spirit returning. The doctors used careful words. They didn't promise anything, but the numbers were moving in the right direction for the first time in 2 years. And Emily caught herself laughing one afternoon in the hospital room, actually laughing at something her mother said, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd done that. She wanted to thank him. She didn't know how. He'd stopped coming to the diner. That was the thing that gnawed at her. 3 weeks now, and Vincent Moretti hadn't walked through the door once. The corner booth sat empty. Dana noticed it too, kept glancing at it during the dead hours, like she expected him to materialize. Emily told herself it was good. It was clean. He'd done his one good thing, and now he was leaving her alone just like he'd promised no leash, no return visit to collect. That was exactly what she'd asked for. So why did the empty booth bother her so much? The answer came on a Tuesday night, 15 minutes before closing. The bell rang, and Emily looked up, and it wasn't Vincent. It was a man she'd never seen big through the shoulders, expensive watch, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He sat at the counter and ordered coffee and watched her pour it with a kind of lazy attention that made the hair on her arms stand up. "You're Emily," he said. It wasn't a question. "Who's asking?" "Marco." He sipped the coffee. "Marco Moretti. I think you know my father." The cold feeling turned to ice. Emily set the pot down carefully and put both hands flat on the counter the way she did when she needed to feel steady. "I know a man named Vincent. I serve him coffee. That's all I know." "That's not all you know." Marco's smile widened, and it was his father's smile, Emily realized, but with everything human scooped out of it, just the shape of it left behind. "My father's a complicated man, powerful man, built something that takes a hard hand to hold on to, and lately, the last couple months, that hand's gone soft." He turned the cup slowly, and Emily recognized the gesture the exact same way Vincent turned his cup, and it chilled her to see it on this man. He's making decisions that don't make sense, backing out of arrangements, telling people he's done. You don't get to be done in our family. You know what happens to men who decide they're done. "I wouldn't know." "No," Marco said. "But you know what changed him. Because it's you. He spends his afternoons in a diner. He pays a waitress's medical bills out of his own pocket and opens no file, asks for nothing, which my father has never done for anyone in his life, including his own children." His eyes went hard. "So I came to see what's so special. And I gotta tell you, miss, I'm looking and I don't see it. I see a tired woman in a cheap uniform, and I can't figure out how somebody like you broke something in a man it took me 30 years to learn how to fear." Emily's heart was slamming, but her voice came out level. "I didn't break anything. I just talked to him like he was a person. Maybe nobody's done that in a while. Maybe you should try it." Something flashed across Marco's face, fast and ugly, gone, almost before she saw it. He set down the cup. "Here's what's going to happen," he said quietly. "You're going to stop. Whatever you're doing to him, you're going to stop doing it. He doesn't come here anymore. Good, keep it that way. If he calls you, you don't answer. If he shows up, you tell him to go home." He stood up and laid a 50 on the counter. "My father built something that keeps a lot of people fed, including him, including me. I'm not going to let a waitress talk him into burning it down because he found a conscience at the bottom of a coffee cup." He buttoned his jacket. "Stay away from my father. This is the only time I'm going to ask nice." He walked out. The bell rang, and Emily stood frozen behind the counter, and Dana came rushing over, white-faced, and the $50 bill sat on the counter between them like a threat, which is exactly what it was. She didn't sleep that night either. But it wasn't the old fear, the fear of the 3 a.m. call. It was a new fear, and it surprised her because it wasn't fear for herself. It was fear for Vincent, because she understood now what she'd done. She'd reached into the most dangerous man in the city and pulled out the human being buried inside him, and that human being was getting Vincent killed. A monster was safe in his world. A monster was useful, predictable, valuable. But a man with a conscience, a man who said he was done, a man who paid a stranger's bills and asked for nothing, that man was a liability. And in Vincent's world, liabilities didn't get pensions. They got erased. She had saved her mother. And in doing it, she might have signed Vincent Moretti's death warrant. Worse, his own son might be the one to carry it out. She had to warn him. She had no way to reach him. 3 days passed. Her mother kept improving. Marco didn't come back, but Emily felt watched, now felt eyes on the diner, on her car, on the walk from the parking lot to her apartment. She told herself she was being paranoid. She knew she wasn't. And then on the 4th day, Vincent walked back in. He looked terrible. That was the first thing she noticed. The weeks had carved something out of him. He'd lost weight. His face was gray, and there was a stillness in him that wasn't peace. It was the stillness of a man who'd made a decision and was waiting for the world to make him pay for it. He sat in the corner booth. He didn't order. Emily came over with the coffee pot and sat down across from him before he could say a word. "Marco came here," she said. Vincent closed his eyes briefly. "I know, I found out yesterday. I'm sorry. He had no right. He told me to stay away from you. He told me I was getting you killed." Emily set the pot down. "Is it true? Are you in danger?" Vincent looked at her for a long moment, and then, because he had never once lied to her, he said yes. The word landed in her chest like a stone. How bad. Bad. He turned his cup, the gesture she'd seen Marco mirror, and now it broke her heart instead of chilling her. "I told my partners I'm out, liquidating, pulling my money out of the things that hurt people and putting it somewhere clean. And there's a federal case, a real one this time, the kind that ends with me in a courtroom. I've been talking to people about that case. The wrong people as far as Marco and the others are concerned. The kind of people who wear badges." He met her eyes. "In my world, Emily, there's only one thing worse than getting weak. It's getting honest. I've done both. They can't allow it. The money's too big. The exposure's too big. A man who's decided to walk away and tell the truth is the most dangerous thing there is." "Then don't," Emily said. "Don't walk away. Don't talk to them. Go back to being what you were and be safe." And Vincent smiled sadly and shook his head. "You don't mean that," he said. "You of all people. You'd rather your mother die free than live on a chain. You said that to me right here at this counter. You think I didn't hear it?" His voice was quiet, steady. "I spent 40 years on a chain. I built the chain myself, link by link, and I called it power. And then a waitress yelled at me over a cup of coffee and wouldn't apologize, and I realized I'd never once in my whole life done a single thing that was free. Everything had a price. Everything was leverage. Everyone owed me, or I owed them." He looked down at his hands. "You gave me one clean thing. Your mother. The one time in my life I did something for no reason but that it was decent. And I can't go back, Emily. I've tasted what it's like to be a man instead of a monster, and I can't unknow it, even if it kills me, maybe especially because it'll kill me." Emily's eyes were burning. "This isn't fair. You finally become someone worth saving, and that's the exact thing that gets you killed." "That's the whole joke, isn't it?" Vincent said softly. "I was untouchable when I was rotten. The minute I tried to be good, I became a dead man walking." He reached across the table, not to take her hand, just to set his own near hers close, but not touching the way he always kept a respectful distance. "I didn't come here to scare you. I came to tell you to listen to my son. Stay away from me. I mean it. Marco's not wrong that you're connected to this now, and the people I'm dealing with, they don't care who's innocent. You have a mother to take care of. You have a life that's finally turning. Don't let me drag you into the fire." "You think I'm going to just walk away?" "I think you have to," Vincent said, "because if anything happened to you because of me, it would undo the only good thing I've got left." His voice cracked just slightly. "Let me have that, Emily. Let me have known one good person and not gotten her killed. It's a small thing to ask." And Emily understood sitting there that she was looking at a man saying goodbye. She didn't accept it. Of course she didn't. She wasn't built to accept it. No, she said. Absolutely not. You don't get to sit there and tell me you finally figured out how to be human, and then hand me a goodbye like it's settled. There's another way. There's always another way. The federal case, the people with badges, they can protect you. They do it all the time. You testify, they put you somewhere safe, a new name, a new life. People do it. People do it, Vincent agreed. Men like me sometimes, but it means leaving everything. Every dollar, every house, every familiar face. It means disappearing into a small life in some town I've never heard of, working some job an old man with a past he can never mention. He almost laughed. Can you see it? Me in a little house mowing a lawn? Yes, Emily said fiercely. Yes, I can see it. That's exactly what I see. A man with a lawn and a past. Nobody knows who finally gets to find out what it's like to live without fear in every room he walks into. That's not a punishment, Vincent. That's the prize. That's everything you've been driving across town to a diner to find. She leaned forward. There's a grandson. You told me. Sophia's boy. The one clean thing left with your blood in it. You can't meet him if you're dead. You can't be the grandfather who shows up if you let them put you in the ground because you were too proud to disappear. Vincent went very still. That's not fair, he said quietly. You said the same thing to me about my mother. It wasn't fair then either. It was just true. Emily's voice dropped. You told me standing up straight doesn't mean refusing every hand. Sometimes it means knowing the difference between a hand and a chain. Well, this is a hand. The badge is the new life, the chance to start over clean. That's a hand. Take it. Don't die proud. Live ashamed and free, and someday be a grandfather. That's the braver thing. You know it is. For a long moment, Vincent Moretti didn't move. The diner was empty around them, the dead hour, just the two of them, and the hum of the cooler and the soft drip of the coffee maker. And Emily watched the war happen on his face, 40 years of one kind of man, fighting against the few months of another kind, and she didn't know which one was going to win. There's something I haven't told you, he finally said, about the case, about why it's worse than I let on. Emily waited. Marco didn't just come here to warn you off, Vincent said slowly. He came because he's already decided. The others want me gone, and they wanted someone who could get close, someone I'd never see coming. And Marco, my son, my own son, he volunteered. His jaw worked. I found out 2 days ago. Someone who's still loyal to me, an old friend, came to me and told me to my face. They asked Marco if he could do it, handle the old man, and Marco said yes. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Your own son. My own son. Vincent's voice was hollow. The boy I raised. The boy I made in my own image, God forgive me. I built a man who can't wait to inherit a kingdom, and the first thing he wants to do with it is bury his father to keep it. He looked up and his eyes were wet, and Emily had never seen that, not once, not in all these weeks. That's the bill, Emily. That's what 40 years of being a monster cost me. I raised a son who'll kill me for the throne, and a daughter who ran so far she sends Christmas cards to my lawyer so I can't find my own grandson. I did that. Nobody did that to me. I did it to myself. And Emily, who had sworn she wouldn't, reached across the table and took his hand. The first time. The only time. She held the hand of the most dangerous man in the city, and it was shaking. Then make it count, she said quietly. If Marco's already chosen, then there's nothing left to protect by staying. The kingdom's gone. Your son's gone. So save the one thing that's still clean. Take the hand, testify, disappear. Live long enough to be the grandfather that little boy deserves, even if you can only watch him from a distance, even if Sophia never forgives you. Live, Vincent, out of spite if you have to, out of love if you can manage it. Her grip tightened. Don't let your son win by making you so ashamed of being alive that you lie down and let it happen. Vincent Moretti looked at the waitress holding his hand, the woman who had walked into his life by refusing to apologize, who had pulled the human being out of the monster and was now refusing to let that human being die. And something broke open in his face. Not despair, something else. Something Emily realized with a start she'd never seen on him before. Hope. You're a hard woman, Emily Carter, he said, his voice thick. My mother raised me to stand up straight, she said. You should meet her sometime. You'd like her. She'd hate you for a while, and then she'd like you. He laughed wet and broken and real, and he wiped his face with his free hand, and for a moment the two of them just sat there, the king of a dying empire and the waitress who'd dethroned him, holding hands across a cracked formica table in an empty diner. "Okay," Vincent said finally. "Okay, I'll take the hand." "You mean it?" "I mean it." He squeezed her hand once and let it go. "There's a man, an agent. I've been talking to him in circles for weeks, never committing. I'll call him tomorrow and commit. The whole thing. Everything I know, everyone, all of it, in exchange for them putting me somewhere Marco can't reach." He took a breath. "It means I disappear, Emily. It means after tomorrow you'll probably never see me again. The man who eats meatloaf in your corner booth, he's gone." Emily's throat tightened. She hadn't expected that to hurt. She'd spent weeks wishing he'd stop coming, and now the thought of the booth being empty forever, of never again looking up to see Vincent Moretti, waiting to be told the truth, opened a small, unexpected ache in her chest. "Then this is goodbye," she said. "Not yet," Vincent said. "Tomorrow. I commit tomorrow. They'll move fast once I do, but I'll have tonight and the morning." He stood up and he looked down at her, and his gray, tired face had more peace in it than she'd ever seen. "Thank you, Emily, for the coffee, for the truth, for my mother's son not dying a monster." He smiled. "For everything." He laid money on the table, the exact change for a coffee he hadn't even drunk, and he turned to go. And the bell over the door rang before he reached it. Emily looked up. Marco Moretti stood in the doorway, and behind him were two men she didn't recognize, and the lazy smile was gone from his face, replaced by something flat and final, and Emily understood in one sickening instant that Marco hadn't waited for tomorrow. "Going somewhere, Pop," Marco said, and Vincent Moretti stopped 3 feet from the door, 3 feet from his son, and Emily saw his shoulders square, saw the old man straighten up, and she gripped the edge of the booth so hard her knuckles went white, because the night that everything broke had been the beginning, and she understood now with terrible clarity that this was where it had all been heading from the very first cup of coffee, and there was no waitress's words sharp enough to stop what was standing in the doorway. Nobody moved for a long moment. The bell had stopped ringing, and the silence that came after it was the same silence that had fallen the very first night, the held-breath silence of a room that knows something terrible is about to happen. "Going somewhere, Pop?" Marco said again, softer this time, and somehow softer was worse. Vincent didn't turn around right away. He stood there 3 feet from his son, and Emily watched his shoulders rise and fall, once a slow breath, the breath of a man gathering himself. When he did turn, his face was calm, calmer than Emily's was, calmer than it had any right to be. "Marco," he said, "you shouldn't be here." "No, you shouldn't be here," Marco said. "That's the whole problem. You should be home running things, being who you've been my whole life. Instead, you're in a Roach Motel diner saying goodbye to a waitress." His eyes flicked to Emily, then back. "I told her to stay away from you. I guess neither one of you listens." "Send your men outside," Vincent said. "This is between us, father and son. They don't need to be here for it." "They're staying." "Marco." And now there was an edge in Vincent's voice, a ghost of the old man, the one the whole city feared. "Send them outside, or do you need 2 grown men standing behind you to talk to your own father?" Something twitched in Marco's jaw. For a second, the boy underneath the killer showed through the kid who'd grown up wanting his father's approval and never getting it, and Emily saw it, and Vincent saw it too. Marco jerked his head, and the 2 men stepped back out onto the sidewalk, just outside the door, close enough to be a threat, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. "There," Marco said. "Happy." "Sit down," Vincent said. "Both of us. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk like men." He gestured at the corner booth. "You came all this way. The least we can do is sit." Marco hesitated. And then, because some part of him was still a son, who'd been told to sit by his father, he walked to the booth and slid in across from where Vincent had been sitting. Vincent sat too. Emily stood frozen behind the counter, the coffee pot still in her hand, and she did the only thing she could think to do. She walked over and she set 2 clean cups on the table and she poured coffee for both of them with hands that were somehow steady, and neither man stopped her. And then she stepped back to the counter and stood there because she would not leave Vincent alone, not now, not for anything. "You volunteered," Vincent said quietly. "That's what I keep coming back to. They asked who could handle the old man and you raised your hand. My son, you raised your hand." Marco didn't deny it. Emily had to give him that in some sick way. He didn't lie about it. "You're falling apart, Pop," Marco said. "You're talking to feds. You're pulling money out, leaving people exposed, people who trusted you, people who'll go to prison if your house of cards comes down. You're going to get a lot of men killed with this conscience of yours. I volunteered because if it has to be done better, it's me. Better it's quick and it's family, and it's done with some respect than some animal they'd send instead." His voice cracked just barely, just enough. "You think I want this? You think this is what I wanted? You did this. You decided to blow up your whole life and you left me holding it. I left you a kingdom built on fear and you're complaining I'm taking it back," Vincent said. "You're not mad that I'm getting out Marco. You're mad that I figured out it was worthless before you got to inherit it. It fed us. It fed both of us. It gave you everything, this city, this name, and now you decide it's beneath you." Marco's hand hit the table and the coffee jumped in the cups. "You don't get to spend 40 years making me into this and then look at me like I'm the monster because I learned the lesson you taught me." And there it was, the thing underneath. Emily heard it, and she saw Vincent hear it, and she watched something collapse in the old man's face because his son had just said the truest thing in the room. "You're right," Vincent said. Marco blinked. "What?" "You're right. I made you. I held you up when you were 6 years old and showed you how to make a man afraid, and I was proud of you for learning it fast. I taught you that everything's leverage, everyone's a transaction, weakness is death, and fear is power." Vincent's voice was breaking now, openly a man dismantling himself in front of his child. "I taught you to volunteer to kill your own father Marco because I taught you that's what strength looks like. So no, you're not the monster. I am. You're just the thing the monster made, and I am so sorry." The diner went dead quiet. Marco stared at his father like he'd never seen him before. The 2 men outside shifted restless, sensing something had changed and not knowing what. "Don't," Marco said. His voice had gone strange. "Don't do that. Don't get soft on me now. That's not how this works." "I know it's not how this works. That's the whole point. I'm done with how this works." Vincent leaned forward. "You want to know why I changed, Marco? Everybody wants to know. Your sister wanted to know before she left. The answer's standing behind that counter, and it's the simplest thing in the world. She yelled at me over a cup of coffee. The first night I came in here, I threw a tantrum like the king I thought I was, and she leaned across that counter and told me she'd end me, and she meant it, and she wasn't afraid. And I realized I'd spent my whole life surrounded by people who were terrified of me, and not one of them, not one ever told me the truth." His eyes were wet. "She told me the truth, every day for weeks. She told me I was lonely. She told me your sister was right to run. She told me I'd ruined you and there was still time to not ruin a 3-year-old boy I've never met. Nobody's told me the truth in 20 years, Marco. And it turns out the truth is the only thing I ever actually wanted, and I built an empire specifically designed to make sure nobody could ever give it to me." Marco looked at Emily then. Really looked. Not the dismissive look from before, the one that found a tired woman in a cheap uniform. Something searching. Something almost desperate. "You did this," he said to her. "You broke him." "I didn't break him," Emily said quietly. "I unbroke him. He was broken when he walked in here. He just had everybody too scared to tell him." "Shut up!" But there was no force in it. Marco's hands were flat on the table, and they weren't quite steady. "You don't get to talk. You don't know anything about us, about what he was about, what this costs. People are going to die because of his conscience. Maybe me. You think they won't come for me too once he flips? You think there's a version of this where I walk away clean, he's dragging me into the ground with him whether I do this or not?" And that Emily realized was the real terror under Marco's flat killer's face. Not greed, fear. The same fear his father had carried for 40 years, the fear of being powerless, the fear of the men above him, the fear that had been bred into him since he was 6 years old, learning to make people afraid. Marco wasn't here because he wanted to kill his father. He was here because he was drowning, and he thought this was the only thing that would keep his own head above the water. Vincent saw it too. Of course he did. He'd made it. "Marco," Vincent said, "look at me. Forget them. Forget the men outside. Forget the people we owe. Forget all of it for 1 second and look at me." He waited until his son's eyes came up. "I can get you out. Both of us. You think I'm flipping to save myself? I'm flipping to save you. The deal I'm making, it covers you. I've already told them. I won't testify, I won't give them a single name unless my son walks out clean with a new life same as me. That's the deal. That's the only deal. You and me gone somewhere they can't reach, no kingdom, no fear, no chain. A small life, a clean one." Marco stared at him. "You're lying." "I have never once lied to her," Vincent said, nodding at Emily. "Ask her if I lie, and I'm telling you in front of her so she can hear it and hold me to it that I would rather have a son alive in a small house mowing a lawn than a son who inherits everything I built and dies young and afraid, like every man in our line. I want you to live, Marco, not as my heir, as my son. There's a difference, and it took me 60 years and a waitress to learn it." The two men outside the door were getting nervous. Emily could see it. One of them leaned in, said something through the gap, and Marco held up a hand without looking, and they stayed put. But the clock was running, and everyone in that diner could feel it. "They'll know," Marco said, and his voice had dropped to almost nothing. "I came here to do a job. I don't do it. I walk back out and tell them what? That the old man talked me out of it. They'll put us both in the ground by morning." "Then we don't walk back out," Vincent said. "We don't go to them at all. I make the call right now, tonight. The agent I've been talking to, he can have people here in 20 minutes. We don't leave this diner as your job and my execution. We leave it as two men taken into protection. It's already in motion, Marco. I was going to call him tomorrow. We just move it up. We move it up to right now." Emily watched the son look at the father. She watched 31 years of resentment and fear and hunger and need war across Marco Moretti's face. And she understood that she was watching the most important conversation of two men's lives, and that nothing she could say or do would tip it, that this was theirs, that all she'd ever done was give Vincent the truth, and now Vincent was trying to give it to his son, and it would either land or it wouldn't. "Sophia's boy," Marco said suddenly. "You said the 3-year-old. "Matteo," Vincent said. "She named him Matteo, after my father, the one decent thing she kept from us." "I have a nephew named Matteo," Marco said slowly, like he was tasting the words like they were unfamiliar in his mouth, "and I've never met him either." "No," Vincent said. "You haven't, because your sister looked at both of us and made the same call, and she was right to. But Marco, we don't have to stay the men she ran from. We get out, we get clean, we get years, and maybe someday a long time from now, we earn the right to meet a little boy who's the only good thing left in this whole rotten family." His voice broke completely now. "I want that. God help me, after everything, that's all I want. To be a man my grandson wouldn't have to run from. You could have that too. You're young. You've got so much more time than me. Don't spend it being the thing I made you. Be the thing you could have been if I'd been a better father." And Marco Moretti, killer air drowning man, put his face in his hands at a cracked Formica table in a roadside diner, and his shoulders shook, and Emily realized he was crying silently, the way men cry when they were taught their whole lives that crying was weakness, and weakness was death. "Make the call," Marco said into his hands. "Make the call before I change my mind. Make it now." Vincent didn't hesitate. He had his phone out before his son finished the sentence. He dialed, and he stood, and he stepped a few feet away, but not far, never far. And Emily heard him say a name, and then say, "It's happening tonight, right now, both of us. My sons, and send them to the diner on Ridgewood. You know the one, and there were no men with him, no threat. Just come and get us." And then he listened, and then he said yes and yes again, and we'll be here. He hung up. He turned around. 20 minutes, he said. "They're coming. Stay in the booth, both of you. We just have to be here alive for 20 minutes. But the two men outside had seen the phone call. Emily watched their faces change through the window, watched them lean into each other, watched one of them reach for his phone, and she understood with a lurch of pure cold terror that 20 minutes was a very long time, and that the men outside answered to people who would not be happy to learn that Marco had made a call instead of finishing a job. "Vincent," she said. "The men, they saw." Vincent looked, and his face hardened, the old face, the dangerous one. But it was different now because he wasn't protecting an empire, he was protecting his son and the woman who'd saved him. "Get in the back," he said to Emily. "The kitchen, now. This isn't yours to be in." "No," Emily said. "Emily, I said no." She came out from behind the counter. "You don't get to send me away. I'm the one who told you to take the hand. I'm not going to hide in the kitchen while you find out if it holds." She looked at the two men outside who were no longer pretending, who were moving now toward the door. 20 minutes. We just have to make 20 minutes. The bell rang as the two men came back in, and the larger one looked at Marco still sitting in the booth at the phone in Vincent's hand, and his face went flat and certain. "Marco," the man said. "What'd you do?" "I changed my mind, Sal," Marco said, and he stood up, and he stepped out of the booth and put himself between the men and his father, the first protective thing Emily had ever seen him do. "We're done. All of us. Walk away. There's people coming, the kind with badges, and you do not want to be standing here when they show up." "You called the feds." Sal said it like he couldn't believe it. "You and the old man both, after everything. They told us he might flip, they didn't say you'd flip with him." His hand moved toward his jacket. "You know I can't let you walk out of here. You know what they'll do to me if I do." "Sal," Vincent said, and he stepped up beside his son, shoulder to shoulder, two Morettis standing together for maybe the first time in their lives. "You've known me 30 years. You really want to do this. You really want to be the man who did this with the feds 12 minutes out. Think. Walk away, and you're just a guy who left a diner. Stay, and you're a guy who did something in front of witnesses with agents on the way. Walk away, Sal. For your own sake, walk away." And Emily stood frozen, watching the two men in the doorway, watching the war play out on Sal's face, the same way it had played out on Marco's. The calculation of a man weighing loyalty against survival, fear against fear. And she understood that the entire night, the entire story, everything since the first cup of coffee shattered against the wall, had narrowed down to this single moment in a doorway, to whether one frightened man would choose to walk away. The clock on the diner wall ticked. Somewhere out in the night, faint and getting closer, Emily heard it before anyone else did, because she'd spent 2 years listening for sounds in the dark. Sirens. Sal heard them too. His head turned, his hand halfway to his jacket stopped. "They're early," Vincent said quietly. "Or you're out of time. Same thing. Last chance, Sal. Walk away." And for 3 full seconds that felt like 3 years. Nobody in that diner breathed the sirens growing louder. Two Moretti standing shoulder to shoulder, a waitress who refused to hide, and a frightened man in a doorway with his hand on the edge of a decision that would end one life or save several. And Emily Carter, who had started all of this by refusing to shrink, stood her ground one more time and watched to see which way the most dangerous moment of all of their lives was going to break. Sal walked away. It came down to that in the end. 3 seconds, the sirens climbing, and a frightened man doing the math one last time and deciding that whatever waited for him outside was better than whatever waited if he stayed. He took his hand off his jacket. He looked at Marco, at Vincent, at the waitress who wouldn't move, and something in his face just gave up. "I was never here," Sal said. "Neither of you saw me." And he grabbed the other man by the arm, and the two of them were gone. Out the door, swallowed by the dark, and the bell rang behind them, and then there was nothing but the sirens and the 3 of them breathing. Vincent's legs went out from under him, not dramatically. He just sat down hard in the booth like the strings holding him up had been cut, and he put his hands over his face and his shoulders shook. Marco stood over his father for a moment, not knowing what to do with his own hands, 31 years old, and never once having comforted the man who made him. And then he sat down beside him, awkward stiff, and put one hand on his father's back, and Vincent reached up and grabbed it and held on. Emily stood by the counter and let them have it. The first honest moment between a father and son who'd spent their whole lives as transactions. She felt like she was witnessing something she had no right to see, and she also felt deep down that this was the thing she'd been put in that diner to do, though she'd never know exactly why. The federal agents came through the door 90 seconds later, and the quiet broke into noise and movement, badges and questions, and a man in a windbreaker saying, "Mr. Moretti, are you hurt? Is anyone hurt?" And Vincent stood and wiped his face and became before Emily's eyes something she'd never seen him be. Cooperative. Small, almost. A man surrendering 40 years of being feared in exchange for the chance to be nobody at all. They were going to take both of them that night, father and son into protection, the wheels already turning. Vincent had been more prepared than he'd let on Emily realized. The deal was further along than he'd admitted in any of their conversations. He'd been getting ready to disappear for weeks and had let her believe he was still deciding. And she understood why he hadn't wanted to scare her, hadn't wanted her tangled in it, had been trying to protect her even as he was unraveling his whole life. The agent in the windbreaker wanted Emily's statement. She gave it in pieces sitting in the corner booth that had become Vincent's, telling a stranger with a notepad about a cup of coffee and 6 words and weeks of meatloaf. The agent kept looking at her strangely, like he couldn't fit her into the story, this tired waitress at the center of the biggest cooperation case the office had seen in a decade. When it was done, when the statements were taken, and the diner was full of official people doing official things, the agent told Emily she should go home, that there was nothing more she could do, that they'd be in touch if they needed her. She looked across the room at Vincent. He was standing with 2 agents ready to be led out into a new life, and he caught her eye, and he asked the agents for a minute, just a minute, and they gave it to him, and he crossed the diner one last time to where she stood. "So this is it," Emily said. "This is it." He looked at her, and his gray, tired face had something in it she'd been watching grow for weeks and now saw fully formed. Peace. Actual peace. "They'll take me somewhere tonight. I won't know where, and even if I did, I couldn't tell you. New name. New everything. The man you knew is over as of right now." He almost smiled. "Vincent Moretti dies tonight in a diner on Ridgewood Avenue. Some other old man wakes up tomorrow. I think I'm okay with that. I think I've been wanting that old man to die for a long time." "Your daughter," Emily said. "Sophia, the grandson, will you ever—" "I don't know," Vincent said honestly. "Maybe, someday. When it's safe, when enough years have passed, when I've become someone worth her risk. The agents say it's possible down the line, a supervised meeting, a chance." His voice thickened. "It's more than I had 2 months ago. 2 months ago, I was a dead man with a son who'd kill me and a daughter who'd erased me and a grandson I'd never see. Now I've got my son walking out beside me alive and a maybe and a whole life I never thought I'd get to have. That's because of you. All of it. Every bit of it is because a waitress wouldn't apologize for a cup of coffee." "You did it," Emily said. "Not me, I just talked. You're the one who made the call. You're the one who turned around in that doorway and stood next to your son instead of running. I gave you the truth. What you did with it was all you." Vincent reached into his coat, and Emily tensed out of old habit, expecting money, expecting the billfold, expecting the leash. But it wasn't that. He took out a plain white envelope and held it out to her. "Before you say no," he said, "it's not what you think. There's no money in it. I know better than that now. You taught me better than that." He pressed it into her hands. "It's a letter. To a man. A lawyer, a real one, a clean one, nothing to do with any of this. He runs a foundation. Medical bills for people who can't pay them. Legitimate, above board, helped thousands of people, nothing dirty anywhere near it. I'm a quiet donor, have been for years, one of the few clean things I ever did, and never told anybody about because it didn't fit the image." He closed her fingers around the envelope. "That letter introduces you, not as someone I'm paying off, as someone I'm vouching for. Your mother's treatment is covered going forward no matter what happens to me through them. Not through me, no chain, no leash, just a foundation doing what it does. And there's a job in there too, if you want it. Administrative work at the foundation, helping other people get what your mother got. Real salary, real benefits, real work that means something." He stepped back. "You can throw it away. You've earned the right to throw anything I give you in the trash, but this one's clean, Emily. I swear it on the only thing I've got left worth swearing on. It's clean." Emily looked down at the envelope in her hands. and she thought about the version of herself who 2 months ago had chased him into a parking lot to shove $200 back at him because everything was a leash. She thought about how much she'd learned since then about the difference between a hand and a chain, the things she'd taught him that he'd just handed back to her. A foundation, she said, helping people pay medical bills. People like you, Vincent said, drowning in it, doing everything right, getting crushed anyway. You'd be good at it. You know what it feels like. You'd fight for them the way you fought with me. He smiled, sad and proud. Take the hand, Emily. I'm allowed to say that to you now. You said it to me enough times. Take the hand. And Emily Carter, who had refused his money, refused his help, refused his protection, looked at the envelope and understood that this was different, that he had finally figured out how to give something without taking, and that refusing it now would be its own kind of pride, the bad kind, the kind that lets people drown to feel clean. Okay, she said quietly. I'll look at it. No promises, but I'll look at it. That's all I'm asking. The agents were signaling now the minute was up. Vincent looked at her one last time, and Emily saw him memorizing her face the way you memorize something you know you'll never see again. You were the first person who didn't react to my name, he said. You reacted to me. Do you know how long I waited for someone to do that? My whole life, my entire life, and I'd given up. I'd decided people like me don't get that. And then there you were in a cheap uniform holding a coffee pot, telling me you'd end me. His eyes were wet. Thank you, Emily, for seeing the man instead of the monster, for believing there was a man in there at all. And Emily, who had 1,000 things she could have said, found that only the simplest one was true. Because you're still human, she said. You just forgot. Everybody around you forgot, so you forgot too. That's all it ever was. You're still human, Vincent. You always were. You just needed one person to remind you. He nodded, unable to speak, and he turned and he walked toward the agents, toward the door, toward a life with no name and no kingdom and no fear. Marco was already there waiting, and as Vincent reached him, the son did something Emily would remember for the rest of her life. Marco put his arm around his father's shoulders, the heir who'd volunteered to kill him holding him up, the two of them walking out together into the dark. Neither one a monster anymore, just two men trying to learn how to be something else. At the door, Marco stopped. He looked back at Emily across the diner, and the flat killer's face was gone, scrubbed away, and what was left was just a frightened, exhausted, strangely young man. He was right about you, Marco said. I came here to figure out what was so special. I get it now. He paused. Take care of yourself. And then they were gone. Both of them swallowed into the night, and the waiting cars, and the door swung shut, and the bell rang one last time, and Vincent Moretti, the most dangerous man in the city, the king of a kingdom built on fear, walked out of Emily Carter's life forever and into a small, clean one she would never get to see. She never saw him again. That was the truth of it, and she made her peace with it. There were no letters, no calls, no messages slipped to her through intermediaries. That was how it had to be, and she understood it. And somewhere underneath the ache, she was glad of it, because the silence meant the deal had held, meant he was alive somewhere. Being nobody meant the maybe with his grandson was still out there waiting to maybe come true. Her mother lived. That was the thing Emily held on to in the weeks and months that followed. Ruth got stronger. The treatment did what the doctors had stopped daring to hope it would do, and by autumn Ruth was out of the hospital bed and sitting in her own chair by the window, complaining about daytime television and demanding Emily bring her the good crossword puzzles, the hard ones, and Emily would sit with her in the evenings, and her mother's voice was strong again. The laughing voice from childhood returned from a place Emily had been certain it was lost forever. You ever going to tell me the whole story? Ruth asked one night. About the bad man trying to be good. Someday, Emily said. Not yet. Did he make it wherever he went? I don't know, Mama. I hope so. I think so. Emily looked out the window at the dark. I think the kind of man who can change that much can probably keep changing. I think he's out there somewhere being okay. I have to think that. Ruth reached over and patted her daughter's hand. You watched what he did next, she said. Like I told you, and he did good. That's worth something, baby. You pulled good out of a man the whole world had given up on. That's worth more than you know. Emily took the job. She thought about it for 2 weeks, And then she went to the foundation and met the clean lawyer with the kind eyes, and she watched the people in the waiting room. People exactly like she'd been drowning and doing everything right and getting crushed anyway, and she knew before she finished the tour that she was going to say yes. She started the following Monday. She left the diner with hugs from Dana and a gruff handshake from Reuben, who told her he'd known from that first night she was meant for something bigger than refilling coffee. She was good at the work. Vincent had been right about that. She fought for people. She knew exactly what it felt like to sit on the wrong side of a phone call with an insurance company, to do the math at a kitchen table and watch it come out wrong every time. And she brought that knowing to every case that crossed her desk. She helped a single father keep his daughter's chemotherapy going. She helped an old woman who reminded her of Ruth. She helped a young couple who'd been one bill away from losing everything, and when they cried in her office, she handed them tissues and told them it was going to be okay. And she meant it because she had the power now to make it okay. The kind of power that didn't come from fear, the kind that built things up instead of holding them down. She thought about Vincent often, less as the months passed but never gone entirely. She'd be in the middle of something ordinary, filing paperwork, pouring a coffee at home, and she'd remember the man in the corner booth eating meatloaf like it was the best food in the world, and she'd wonder where he was, who he'd become, whether there was an old man somewhere mowing a lawn, and finding out at last what it felt like to walk into a room and have nobody be afraid. She liked to imagine that there was. She liked to imagine that somewhere in some small town, she'd never know the name of a man with a quiet life, and a past he could never mention was sitting on a porch in the evening, and that maybe, just maybe, after enough years had passed, there was a little boy named Mateo running across the grass toward him, and that the old man got to be a grandfather after all, got to be the thing his daughter had run from him to find, got to hold the one clean thing left with his blood in it. She didn't know if it was true. She'd never know, but she chose to believe it because she'd learned from a dangerous man in a roadside diner that what you choose to believe about a person can be the very thing that makes it real. A year later, on an ordinary afternoon, a new client came into the foundation, a frightened woman with a sick husband and a stack of bills she couldn't bring herself to open. She sat across from Emily's desk, wringing her hands, apologizing for taking up the time, apologizing for needing help, apologizing the way people do when the world has spent a long time teaching them that their needs are an imposition. And Emily Carter leaned forward the same way she'd once leaned across a diner counter at the most dangerous man in the city. And she said gently, "Stop apologizing. You did everything right, and the world crushed you anyway, and that is not your fault, and you don't have to shrink in this office. Not here. Sit up straight. We're going to fight this together." The woman started to cry, and Emily handed her a tissue and got to work, and somewhere underneath it all, she felt the quiet hum of a circle closing, because she had spent her whole life refusing to shrink, and now she got to spend the rest of it teaching other people they didn't have to either. That was the thing she'd come to understand in the end. The most dangerous moment is never when someone shouts at you. It's the moment after the moment when you decide whether to make yourself small or whether to stand up straight and look them in the eye. A waitress had stood up straight to a king and pulled the man out of the monster. A king had stood up straight to his own empire and walked away from everything to save his son and his soul. And now a woman behind a desk was teaching the frightened to stand up straight too, one person at a time, the way it had been passed to her. Respect, she'd learned, is not something the powerful hand down to the powerless. It is something you take by refusing to bend, and then if you're lucky, something you spend the rest of your life giving away. Emily Carter had refused to shrink on the worst night of her life, and it had cost her nothing and saved everyone, and she would never for the rest of her days shrink again. And neither, she made sure, would anyone who walked through her door.